All right. Welcome, everybody, to the new Nerd Herd. Today is June 18th. I am joined by Elmer, and
Hello.
today we're going to be chatting about a couple of things that might be pretty relevant to a lot of our fans and users and clients out there over in the Gulf. This is hurricane season, so today we're going to be chatting about what to do when it comes to data and tech during hurricane and storm times. And I think, Elmer, I can sum it up into two pretty broad umbrella topics here today is going to be disaster recovery and data resiliency. That's where my mind goes, the two DRs. How do you protect your data? How do you keep your business running during hurricane season when anything can go wrong? You know, Elmer and I think have both seen it a lot. Some people think M365 being in the cloud is enough sometimes, and they make that fatal mistake of thinking that, oh, it's in the cloud, everything's backed up. But we're going to talk about that today. It requires some more careful planning, I think, than just assuming that cloud is enough to back you up.
Well,
So,
that's the place to start. It's not before you can get to how do I back up, you begin with am I backed up?
yeah, yes, yep, absolutely. And the question is let me ask you, Elmer, if I've got a Microsoft 365 tenant, or if maybe I'm using Google Workspace and my email is saved in the Microsoft Cloud, am I backed up?
Yeah, well, I think I can just say this pretty flatly that if you're not doing intentional backups, if you're not intentionally, consciously executing a backup process and then testing that process and following up on it to make sure that it runs day in and day out and that you can recover the data from the backups that you're creating. If you're not intentionally, consciously doing that, then your data is at risk. It's even if you think it's backed up, it's not backed up, it's not secure. And I got started as a network engineer in the 90s, kind of when networks became a thing.
Hmm.
And in those days, hard disks were a fragile thing.
Yep.
They broke down all the time. You had to restore from, hardware from bare metal
Yep.
often. It wasn't an occasional thing. It wasn't, I wonder if one day I'll have to restore everything kind of a
Hmm.
thing. It
Hmm.
was a part of your operational process that when the server went down, you had to get a new server and recover.
Yeah.
But these days, the equipment has become more reliable, certainly. And hard drives don't just die. A lot of times it's not even a hard drive anymore, it's a chip.
Yep.
So the local storage has become very reliable. And I think it's led us to a level of complacency maybe or assumption. I think many people don't even ask the question, is my data at risk? Is it backed up? If the
Hmm.
computer dies, can I recover it? If I
Yeah.
drop my phone in a lake, can I get the photos back? Like, what's that story? And when you start to drive into that a little bit, you'll find out, as I said, that it has to really be an intentional thing. That you're asking the question, what data is important to me? How can I secure that? And multiple copies, redundancy
Redundancy. Yep.
is your friend.
Yep. Well, and let's jump into backups directly, right? Like, so what makes a backup? What is a backup? How do I know that I'm backing something up, and how do I know that I'm backing it up correctly? I think sometimes the thing that people forget is to test backups regularly. I think we've talked about it before back in the day on one of these podcast episodes, that if you're backing something up and you don't know how or if you can restore from that backup, you didn't really back anything up in the first place. If it's not tested, if you don't have the plan in place, then you really didn't do the work. You've just sometimes I've heard some people call it cybersecurity theater. you're putting on a show.
It's
Yeah,
a
I'm backed up.
mental exercise because you're
Yeah.
not physically protecting your data unless you know you can recover it. And that's a lot of people, and I've used to see this as a fundamental mistake, even in the network engineer community, where they designed a backup process to facilitate the backup process. And
Hmm.
the product and the solution and the processes around creating the backups was all designed to make that process as easy as possible. But the
Hmm.
fact is, when you have to recover everything, the easy backup process is not really what you want.
Hmm.
That's not the only basket you want your eggs in, was the easy backup process, especially if you never tested the backups to make sure you could restore. And
Right.
an example of that is just back in the old days when you had to rotate storage media. And if the media didn't get rotated, manually on time, then the backups would fail.
Mm.
And a lot of times, as a person who got the phone call when the server crashed, and I had to sit in that chair and say, how do I save this business from
Right.
closing?
Right.
At this point, their operations are gone.
Hmm.
And the only way they're going to pay their employees or mail out invoices next month is if I can rebuild this system.
Yep.
And at that moment, when everyone's payroll is resting on your shoulder and you get handed a backup tape that they thought was from last week and it has never been tested, the restore has never been done, and you find out as you put the tape in or the disk in or you load up the cloud storage, it doesn't matter where this backup lives. The fundamental fact is, if you have not been doing restore tests, everything up to that point was just an exercise,
Yep.
because nothing matters but the restore. You can
Hmm.
faithfully back up daily for 10 years, and if you can't restore when you need to, none of it matters. And
Hmm.
so the only way to know when you can restore from the backup you're creating is to try it once in a while.
Yep.
There is no shortcut to a desktop exercise to restore your data and make sure that when you click the button, you have files that show back up on your hard drive.
Hmm. Well, I want to bring it down to a practical level, right? What would you say, how often should we be backing up? Is it an everyday thing? Is it multiple times a day? And then how many times would you suggest in a year, say, that you test that recovery process? I feel like most people would probably say if they do it at all, they do it annually, right? Is annual enough?
Yeah, I think the answer to those questions is a question. And the question is, how much data are you willing to lose? So,
Mm-hmm.
there's a recovery point objective and a recovery time objective when we're engineering disaster recovery, business continuity, resiliency solutions. The data recovery point is, how much data do I get back? Do I get it all back? Do I get the data back at the moment that the failure happened? Do I get the data back up to last night? Do I get the
Mm-hmm.
data back from a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? How much data are you willing to lose? So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to determine your frequency. And
Okay.
then the recovery time objective is going to be, how long does it take me to recover? How complicated is the process? From the point it goes down to the point that I'm operational again, how long
Mm-hmm.
does that take? So
Mm-hmm.
those are the two things we engineer, a backup solution around. How long is it going to take me to get back up and running? And how much data am I willing to lose?
Right.
And the willing to lose is, I'm willing to lose a year's worth of data, then test your backup once a year.
I see. Mm-hmm.
You're not willing to lose this year's worth of data, Well, how would it hurt if 11 months back is your restore point? Then, if that's not a good answer to you, then you need to back up regularly and test those according to that pain point. Like, as a business owner, what's my level of comfort in securing my business? Do I need payroll backed up nightly? So this when to tell you how old I am, the first backups that I did on 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, and
Oof.
it took me 65 floppy disks every time I sat down, and about an hour and a half of putting floppy disks in, right? And so it was a real intentional process to back up my computer. I had to dedicate time. I had to have a stack of disks. One time I was backing up to those floppies and the computer failed in the middle of the backup and I lost the computer and the backup. So I had to start using 3 sets of 65 floppies to do my backup so that I had redundancy.
Yeah.
But now, it can be automated and scheduled and processed in a way that it's a decision for you. Certainly, there are costs involved, but there are technical solutions available to the small business marketplace now that allow you to stream your data so
Hmm.
that it's backed up in real time. And I think a more common solution is is probably a nightly type of a data capture, you
Hmm.
know, where you have a scheduled process that runs at a least busy time for the environment and it grabs the data and it sends it off site. So
Hmm.
that would be the most common backup option.
Hmm.
And the testing your backups, I would say whatever backup solution you choose, and Trumbull Tech offers some really excellent options for securing your data and answering these operational problems. But whatever backup solution you choose, you need to be able to monitor the state of the backups and to do restores.
Hmm.
Restore test, the solutions that are in use today allow you to even schedule restore tests so
Hmm.
that it will automate the process of spooling up the backup data store, sending the files to a location, reading those files and comparing them with the original to make sure that you're extracting data and putting it back identically as an automated process. So all of that can really be done in an automated way, in a background way, uh,
Hmm.
by working with a knowledgeable IT provider these days, and solutions that are affordable for the small business marketplace. This used to be a solution that was only available to enterprise level
Yeah.
clients that had really deep pockets, I'm sorry, to be able to stream data, automate, restore tests, and do the kind of things that can be done for the small businesses today.
Yeah, and as you said, I mean, it's only gotten easier, right? We don't need 35 floppy disks anymore. We don't even need CD-ROMs and hard disks and all that. Now you can download a program and it can pull it off site too, which is something I want to highlight that you mentioned. You mentioned the ideal backup process is something that happens nightly and it pulls that data and puts it somewhere else, not in the server in your closet or not in the computer down the hall in your office building. It is in a data center, it's on the internet in the cloud somewhere. It is away from your hardware because I think that's critical. I think some people will say like, yeah, I've got, a couple different storage devices here that my laptop over there. I usually move things over there and, that's my shared drive or something. It's not enough, right? Because I mean, there's certain differences between losing power, say during a storm, to bring it back down to that hurricane season we're going through right now. Although I've heard it's mild, I've heard that it hasn't been so bad down there. We're talking about the difference between your office being taken out in a flood and losing power for a couple of days. You want to be prepared to lose everything that is in your workstation area. We had someone recently that had a storm, and their hardware was damaged from the storm. It was plugged in through a surge protector, and their laptop was just gone. There was no like evidence of a lightning strike or something like that. It wasn't traumatic, but it does happen, and that can affect everything that's plugged into that cabling inside your building, not just the plug, not just that computer, not just everything else that's in there, but it can affect other things in your office. So I think it's critical to remember that off-site function. Putting it somewhere else is better than keeping it near you. So
Amen.
yeah.
Yeah. And
I,
as a 35-year network engineer for hire, I got every disaster recovery call there is. And I don't have hurricanes. I'm located in Wyoming, but we have 30 below zero temperatures during the winter. And I've gotten the call on Monday morning from a customer that said, there's a waterfall on my server rack right now. And when we walked into the location, there was 4 inches of water on the floor, and the water pipe that ran directly over the server rack in the server room. They had a special server room that was air conditioned, and everything was was environmentally controlled, but they didn't realize that the water pipe to the bathroom ran directly through that room. And when it busted over the weekend, it basically just released a torrent of water down their server rack, and
oh wow.
everything that was in the rack, all the communications equipment, all the server equipment, even their brand new $30,000 photocopier that was sitting next to it, was all basically in water. And so I've had people bring me a server that was melted in a fire when the building burned down. And when I asked the question, do you have backups? Their answer was, the backups were in the computer.
Ooh.
And the computer
Yikes.
was melted. It was melted.
Wow.
The computer was dripping. It got so hot.
Wow.
And so those things happen. We talk a lot in disaster recovery circles about these things almost in a theoretical sense. But I've lived it every day. Like, I've gotten every one of these calls. I've had to recover every one of these businesses. And the only reason any of them still exist is because they had backups. In the end, they had backups, except for the people with the fire. I won't waste time here with that story. The data was recovered by miracle, but in the end, having backups that you can restore from is critical. Testing those backups, knowing you can restore, is critical. Along with that is the question that we said earlier of redundancy. Can I put everything in one place? And that's one of the things that we discovered. There's probably a couple of things to talk about that lead up to this. One is my data backed up? And I'm not sure we fully delved into that. I think a lot of people assume that because everything's in the cloud nowadays, I use Microsoft Office 365, I use Google Suite, all my data is in the cloud. I'm not storing anything on my local drive. I don't need this conversation. And nothing could be further from the truth. Those companies are not backing up your data. And those companies experience failures. Those companies experience malicious attacks. Those companies lose data. And even if they don't, we discovered at the outbreak of the ransomware attacks, back in 2013, that when something like that happens and the bad guy encrypts all your data, and then your nightly backup, backs up encrypted data, or your Microsoft cloud environment is storing encrypted data. When that first began to happen as part of the recovery process, we often reached out to the cloud vendors, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and we asked the question, now that all the data that belongs to this business is sitting on your servers in an encrypted format, can you restore from last week's backup? And the answer was always no. We don't back up your data. It's up to you to back up your data. It's up to you to secure your data. And it's probably written right in the fine print of your license agreements. So when you look, it says right there in black and white, Microsoft doesn't back your data up. It's your responsibility to back your data up. And we got about 1 million security settings that are probably not right. And it's your responsibility to check your security settings because we don't back up your data and we don't secure your environment. And that's
Mhm.
right in the license agreement. So those things are the customer's responsibility. If your data is in the cloud, if I go back to what I started this conversation with, if you are not intentionally and consciously executing a backup and testing process, then your data is at risk. There's
Mhm.
no other way. You can't reason your way around that. That's a
Mhm.
flat statement. If you're not
Yep.
doing something about it, you're going to lose it one day.
Now, you mentioned something that I find interesting. You mentioned talking about trying to recover from ransomware events.
Yeah.
And when we say ransomware, for those who may be listening who aren't sure what that means, we're talking about when someone is able to connect to your system in some manner where they're able to encrypt it and hold it for ransom like a hostage. And you won't be able to access it until you do whatever they say,
Pay money, lots and
yeah,
lots and
most of
lots
the
and
time.
lots of
Most
money.
of the time, lots of money, and it does happen. It's very frequent. I mean, I'm out here in Nevada, in the Las Vegas area. Some of the biggest casinos here have been victims to ransomware attacks, and they have paid. They did not go to authorities. They chose to pay the millions and millions of dollars to get their data back. And I want to discuss a type of backup that is supposed to sort of target this weakness. I want to talk about what an immutable backup is and how that protects against ransomware attacks. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, well, you know, it calls into question the supply chain question.
Mhm.
And that's a big discussion that would deserve an entire show on its own.
Tune in next time.
Right. But it's important to know that your vendors are human too. And I've often said that cloud solutions are just somebody else's computer. There's not
Mhm.
a magic fairy dust computer kingdom called the cloud where everything's magically safe and protected. That's just the opposite. Microsoft's got a computer sitting somewhere and your data's on it, and it
Mhm.
can fail. And not only that, they can get hacked. And Microsoft's been hacked, Google's been hacked, Amazon's been hacked, everybody's been hacked. The bad guys are in all those places. So it's really kind of up to you again to protect that data, to secure that data.
Right. And the immutable backup is something where it backs up in an encrypted status, correct?
Yep.
Where it is unreachable until the retention policy is completed. So it's the type of backup where it can't be accessed in a ransomware event. A lot of the times, if you get ransomware, you lose access to your data and your device is gone. You can restore from your backups unless in the event of that ransomware, they got access to your backups as well, right? But an immutable backup won't let them touch that data because the retention policy is still there. It's still being held for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever that retention policy is.
Yeah, even if the bad guys get if your backup vendor's hacked, even if the
Yep.
bad guys get your backup, it won't do them any good because it's, double super secret encrypted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They got a special password. We got a couple of questions that we might want to address. We got a question that says, how can I tell if my backups are actually working? And I think my first instinct is to say, we've discussed a little bit about making sure that we're testing. If you're not testing the restore process, then you're not really backing up in the first place. So I think it bears repeating that we've spoken before about keeping cybersecurity mindsets top of your mind for your team. Have these conversations with your teams. Have these meetings where you go through fake disaster recovery scenarios. I've seen vendors out there who offer simulations for disaster recovery. You can train your team on this, and you can use your actual backups to practice what it would look like. And I think that, like we've talked about before on other topics, I'll say it one more time, cybersecurity mindset. You want your team to know these things and keep it top of mind. So walking them through that process, they can see how it works and they can set expectations for themselves on how to handle it.
Perfect. You know, you have to test. I mean, if you haven't tested the recovery, you don't know that you can recover.
Mhm.
And so due diligence says, yeah, exercise your business continuity disaster recovery plan. And
Yep.
when it comes to data backups, you know, more often is better. And if it's
Mhm.
something that can be automated and you can work with a vendor that makes sure that these things are done, then yeah, even so much the better.
Mhm. Well, we've talked a lot about the practicality of these cybersecurity topics. I want to talk a little bit about how storm season's going on down there. Supposedly, like I said, I've heard it hasn't been too bad over in the Gulf right now. We're seeing lower winds than normal, but we're still seeing things like high wind shear, high wind speeds, things that can cause power outages, things that can cause catastrophic damage to power grids. What are some steps that, small businesses can take today, tomorrow, just run into the store to help keep them running in the event of like a power outage? Or, like something that isn't so, my office got picked up by a hurricane and threw over there or something like that. They just, lost power or something like that. What is something that they can do to keep them running?
You bet. You know, there's another category of functionality, disaster recovery functionality, business continuity functionality that has really filtered down to an affordable level for the small business marketplace. Uh, what do I do if the building's gone? You know, then what? And that question can be answered. It sounds pretty complex. It can be very complex. Most businesses, and I haven't touched much on this, but most businesses, the data question is a lot more complicated than most business people think it is.
Mhm.
You've got more data than you think. It's in more places than you think. And backing up your email is completely different from backing up your Word documents, which is completely different from backing up, you know, your QuickBooks accounting program. So all of those data sets might require individual solutions or specialized processes to make sure that that data gets captured. And as such, the testing process can, you know, be a lot more complicated than you think in order to make sure that that gets back. And so it's important, but again, it has trickled down to the point that solutions for business resiliency, if you're using cloud solutions, you can really gain access to some tremendous short-term kind of
Mhm.
solutions if the business goes, you know, into a bad state.
Mhm.
Cloud-based solutions, a lot of the backup programs, especially the programs that Trumbull Tex works with, the data gets backed up to a cloud provider, and that cloud provider can make that data available to you in a number of different ways. If you know, if you have problems with the physical location, or you need to recover it quickly, or you need to get short-term
Mhm.
access to a certain amount of data or a certain data set, they can spin your servers up in the cloud
Yep.
and give you what appears to you to be the server that was backed up, but as a virtual representation in the cloud with all the data available
Yep.
to you. Now, there might be some performance limitations in some of these recovery scenarios. You know, if you've got 50 employees, you might not be able to throw all of them on, you know, loading up CAD drawings off of a
Right.
cloud-based server type of a thing. But in a business continuity scenario, a disaster recovery scenario where, gosh, you need to get access to your payroll program, your bookkeeping program, you need to pull up, you know, documents that have people's phone numbers and addresses and the name of the insurance guy. You know, when you need to get access to some data, those are great options that help you manage those situations.
Yeah, and then to speak a little bit about that, not necessarily an advertisement for Trumbull Tech, but I do think it is pretty impressive what you can do with those cloud-based solutions like you talked about. I mean, we're talking about you know, hypothetical situation, maybe you're a couple of users in an office and you lost the device, a laptop's gone, maybe someone dropped it, you know, like anything can happen, right? And it's just broken, you can't get to it, but there was a file on there that you needed to turn in somewhere and you need to get that file back, or maybe you had some emails or something like that. With our solution, we can actually, you know, once you get another device or on another device in your office, we can rebuild your lost device on the new device to almost make it look like it never left. You have it back. It's essentially a virtual operating system with a virtually saved, you know, downloaded to that virtual system, all the files and applications you had installed, and it can make you, you know, zero interruption. It'll look the same. So pretty incredible what you can do nowadays with backups. I mean, it did not used to be like that, Elmer. Like, I'm sure, talk about those floppy disks, because I'm sure you were staring at hexadecimal numbers and binary and trying to pull raw data for files. It's not like that anymore. I mean, even just like a couple decades ago with PST files, being able to recreate email inboxes, it's different now, right? And so being able to pull up your whole system and then navigate it like it used to be is pretty impressive. So those solutions are out there, and I think they usually bill by the size of your backups. They usually bill by the size of your data. So if you got anyone's ever interested, check it out. Talk to
Yeah, you
us.
know, even the best engineered solution back in the day, if we needed to recover a server, it was hours, maybe days. And
Mm,
that was just the time it took, you know, to transfer that amount of data from one hard drive to another hard drive.
yeah.
And now the recovery process can be minutes. I mean,
Yep.
an IT provider can get the phone call and say, "Man, we had a problem. I need to get access to," and within minutes, that access can be provided. So
Yep.
it's pretty magical.
It is. Yeah. It's impressive. Um, I believe I've covered all our topics today, Elmer. If you have anything else you want to talk about, I'll give you this moment.
No, you know, I just mentioned that we don't see hurricanes up here. If anyone's experiencing that kind of weather, you know, you're in my thoughts and prayers, our thoughts and
Absolutely.
prayers. You know, we've got people all along the East Coast, and you know, anytime there's bad weather, you know, we certainly feel that here at Trumbull Tech, and just hope everyone stays safe. And if you have any questions about making sure that your data is protected, you know, reach out to Trumbull Tech and answer that question. Don't wonder about it. You know, don't worry about it. Check that box and make sure that it's done.
Absolutely. Great. And before we leave, we'll leave one last message that keep that cybersecurity top of mind. Basically, what you just said, Elmer. I'm just going to echo it a little bit more. You know, think about these things. Don't assume. Plan them. Write them down. Discuss them with your team. Keep them in front of mind. It's important, and it'll help keep you safe. But all right, I think that's it for our show. Thank you so much for joining me, Elmer. Thank you for everyone for listening. I had a blast,
Been
and we'll see you
great.
guys next time.
Mm-hmm. Bye all.
Bye.